Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice World Championship here for Starcraft 2. And whilst we always come here year after year now, the Intel Extreme Masters has existed for a whole lot longer than that. Something else that has also existed for a whole long while is Starcraft in its entirety. 20 years has come and gone, and we are celebrating that event. 20 years of Starcraft. It's incredible to think about. To my right-hand side, joining us, I do have Artosis and our special guest. Whoa! You came out of nowhere. You came out of nowhere. I'm joined by Tim here. We've commandeered him all the way from America. We've brought him over here to Poland. And Tim, why don't you just introduce yourself first and tell us what you do for StarCraft 2?
Sure thing. I am the production director for StarCraft 2, which just means that I manage manage the production team and help set the strategy for the product.
Okay. So I want to ask you first, kind of coming into things, Tim, here. How have you been enjoying Katowice? Looking at the tournament, how it's been going on? What do you think so far?
So many good series here, and this crowd in Poland is just one of the best esports audiences anywhere.
Oh, I can definitely second that one. Let me butt in here for a second. I've been all over the world, and Poland is right there at the top.
That's why we keep coming back year after year, my friends. It's very, very special indeed. Well, of course, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of things in a moment, guys. But before we do that, let's, of course, celebrate 20 years of StarCraft.
I can't see anything, Jim. Well, hold on. Wait, got it. Ah, hell. This thing ain't gonna hold. Shut up.
Hell, it's about time. My life for hire.
Where is the air support?
"20 years of StarCraft. It's a shame for me that I actually missed a lot of the original StarCraft coming through, but getting involved in StarCraft 2, a little bit of Brood War towards the end, certainly a magical feeling. Tim, I want to start things off. It's 20 years, 20-year anniversary here. What is StarCraft going to be doing to celebrate that 20th anniversary?
Well, StarCraft 1 is going to offer some unlockable content, a new console skin for logging into the game. StarCraft 2 is also going to have some console skins and a portrait and some decals. So lots of content for StarCraft, but it's not just StarCraft that's celebrating at Blizzard. All of the products around Blizzard are going to help us join in the celebration for 20 years of StarCraft 2.
Right. Artosis?
Yeah, you know, 20 years. That's a long time. You're kind of making me feel dated having played this game now for 20 years. But, I mean, I look at this and all the exciting things that are still happening. I always look at it through that esports thing, right? The competitiveness of StarCraft. And for me, that's why it's stayed around. It's the hardest video game in the world. But why do you attribute such success and long-standing to StarCraft?
I really do think that StarCraft is the most competitive 1v1 game in the world, and I think that is part of the reason that it's still relevant today. But the other thing about StarCraft that's so amazing is the community around the game. All of the players, all of the fans, and of course, you guys, the
Aw.
casters. So
It's brought everyone together like a family. I think that's fair to say. Every time we come to these events, and everybody out there as well watching, you know, we've come together and created this like really strong bond with one another. And it's been absolutely awesome to watch for as long as we've been able to do so. So I want to ask you, Tim, what are some of the activities that we can expect here with the 20th anniversary coming around?
yeah, we're going to have a video featurette that's going to be shared with everyone at the end of the month. And I think the actual anniversary of StarCraft is March 31st.
Okay.
And we've also got a Twitch stream that's going to be happening on the 30th and the 31st. And Twitch themselves, I think, are doing lots of activities throughout the month.
Okay.
Wow, I mean, it sounds very exciting to me. I'm really kind of pumped to see what these overlays are going to be and the decals and all that stuff. Is that going to be stuff that you play to unlock?
Yeah, for StarCraft and StarCraft 2, it's actually a login to unlock, so just encouraging everybody to come back and spend some time in the game.
Cool, cool. So I think Twitch is going to be involved in some way as well. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You are 100% right. Twitch has been with StarCraft really for many years.
Yes.
It's part of the scene and the DNA that we are so grateful for. Twitch will be running some of their own content as well as hosting our 2-day stream on the 30th and 31st.
Fantastic, fantastic. Sounds really good. So do you have any other questions for now, Dan? Or
No, I mean, I'm excited. I just want it to be the end of the month.
Yeah? There you go. Paychecks and everything. Not only that. All right, let's get things going then, of course, because not only is it the 20th anniversary for StarCraft, but the entire Blizzard universe is coming together to celebrate this momentous occasion. Lots of goodies coming to the Blizzard universe. Artosis. You know, the funniest thing is that I play every single Blizzard game.
Yeah.
Diablo, you know, the least, but I still play a lot of Diablo. And actually, looking at that little battle cruiser
Oh,
pet.
it's so cute.
The battle cruiser pet. Oh.
Well, I tell you what, I don't play every Blizzard game. That kind of made me want to, but they saved the best for last. That StarCraft 1 skin, I can't wait.
Fantastic stuff, fantastic stuff. Well, thank you very much, Tim, for joining us here. Overall, everything that is coming to these games looks fantastic as well. I'm secretly always playing World of Warcraft, so I'm excited for that as well. So I want to ask you, being here in Katowice, we're about to have the grand finals, Rogue going up against Classic. I've been racking my brain over who I actually think is going to be able to take this, but you probably have a little bit of insight into this video game, seeing as you kind of made a lot of it. So who do you think is actually going to be able to take this one? What do you think?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me this question. These are two of the best players in the game. Trying to pick a winner out of these two, for me, is impossible. I don't know.
Well,
Really? Are you? No. Oh, Tim. Okay, that's fine. I can accept this. I can accept this. How about you, Artosis, before we get into it?
Well, I've been talking about him a lot, but the champion from BlizzCon, I mean, what if he just continues this domination? What if he wins all the tournaments for the rest of the time? What do we do?
Yeah, if he's like back-to-back world champion, that is utterly crazy. Thank you very much, Mr. Tim Morton, for joining us here. It's always a phenomenal pleasure to be able to talk to Blizzard about everything that is going on and the internal workings going down. Speaking of internal workings, check out this behind-the-scenes action of what is going on here in Katowice.
Intel Extreme Masters is a titanic amount of work for literally dozens of people. Let's see how everything's done.
The most important thing during production is to check everything, every position, every station. I have direct contact to the talents to have the show runs smoothly.
It's really a pleasure to work with the IEM staff, the IEM production. These guys work so hard. They're always here early in the morning, leave late at night. They leave no stone unturned, really, trying to make everything as good as it can.
In the production directly at the event, there's about maybe 50 people working, making sure that, you know, you've got all the stories covered correctly, you've got all the videos covered correctly, you've got all the player features that are pumped out on time, and it's a titanic effort because we've got over 70 players here in Katowice, and at the same time you have to present them on camera as well as possible, and you have to show them to the audience so they look like heroes, they look like the amazing individuals that they are.
Besides GFXs and all other stuff during the IEM Starcraft 2 production, the very important thing is video content. So we have a bunch of people here who are actually preparing the videos, editing the videos and recording the stuff just to make the best videos, to make the show even better.
Production has tons of elements to make it looks good. We have the cameras, we need to adjust it, we need to prepare the graphics, we need to think about the video content. I mean, there is tons of things, tons of people working on the event to make it look good.
We usually begin working on broadcast graphics package a few weeks, even a few months in advance, depending whether or not we're planning to use something that already exists, or if there's work that needs to be done. We usually decide internally whether we're happy with the assets we currently have, or whether we need to create something special. We have the assets ready. That's when the other half of the work comes in, which is the integration in our broadcast software. That usually consists of working with league ops, working with photographers, working with project managers to dial in all the sponsors, all the photos, all the content that we want to display. Overall, we all want the show to turn out as good as it can be and give the viewers the best experience.
I'm in charge of observing half of the StarCraft matches. This is a pretty demanding job, but thankfully I'm also a decent player. I practice with the other guys that are high levels, so I know how to show and what to show in exact moments of the game. This is pretty much what it is. It requires a lot of focus, but because I'm quite fast, I can just keep up with everything.
One thing that I really appreciate about this, and I know all my fellow co-casters appreciate, is that every single event, they're trying to make it better than the last one. And I think that that's something you can really see in IEM Katowice 2018.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice. Do you know what time it is? I know what time it is, and everybody out there knows what time it is. It's time for the grand final, the best of 7 to determine who is going to become our world champion here for the Intel Extreme Masters. Classic is going to go up against Rogue in an epic showdown to find out who wins $150,000. To my right-hand side, joining me, we have Pig and we have Rotterdam, able to duke it out in the mines here for Starcraft 2 to figure out who is going to be able to take this. Gentlemen, it couldn't have come down to 2 better players, Rotterdam. We have 2 of the biggest, best minds, best players here in the entire Starcraft universe.
Absolutely, and the way that Classic has been playing as well this week. It's funny because a lot of people looked at him and really said that he could potentially go all the way this time, that this could very well be his tournament, and he showed up in a bigger way than I think even anybody expected. He is playing Protoss on a whole nother level compared to everybody else, and Rogue on the other end, I mean, he's our global champ.
Indeed, Rogue, of course, he's come through after what is realistically a grueling match. I was sitting there that entire series towards the end thinking, okay, what's Maru versus Classic going to look like? And now it's like, oh, wait a second. You know, Rogue just clutching that one back at the end. And I think on paper, before we got to today, I would have said Rogue is the favorite here.
Right.
But watching the way Classic has blitzed this bracket, it's really, it's not about a piece of paper and what your form in the matchup looks like. It's about how can you perform here on this stage in front of this audience. And so far, Classic hasn't even broken a sweat. He hasn't shown a single bit of temerity. He's just not afraid at all. He's looking so good, and for me, that says a lot about how you're going to perform now in the grand finals.
They're each other's biggest challenge here on this stage. When you look at the 76 players that came in, 2 names stand out at the very, very end that have not been able to play each other at this tournament, and when they clash, there is going to be fireworks. If you look at Rogue, we saw a preview of his ZVP in going up against Hurricane in the round of 12, Rotterdam, and that was not close.
No, I think yesterday we had 8 best of 5s, of which 6 were almost legendary. 1 was good, and 1 was just a little bit of a beatdown. And that was Rogue against Hurricane.
Yep.
Rogue looked very good in the matchup, but he also looked a little like, I almost don't even want to reveal too much here, so he made it very simple.
Right.
We can't say too much. I have a hard time believing that Rogue can play in a similar way against Classic as he did against against Hurricane. Those were multiple Nidus networks right in your face, and it was cool because he made it work in a convincing manner, but Classic has looked way too good in this tournament to die against builds like that.
And on the other side of things, Pig, Classic even I should say, looking at his game against Serral just before, yes, there may have been nerves on Serral's side, but Rogue came in, planned, determined, and confident, and you could see it in his execution. You could see it in his play. He was not to be trifled with in that series.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think we saw a lot of what playing Pro League in the past, playing in the Korean team houses has done for these Korean players, and Classic especially, I think he came in with the best plan possible to defeat Serral, and I expect the same thing again here against Rogue. He is not a player who just kind of goes in and says, hey, I'm going to just try to get in my comfort zone and feel it out. He comes in with these very well planned out build orders, and it's almost like a surgeon purposefully just kind of picking his opponent apart. He applies pressure in the right places, and we see his opponents play worse than you expect. And this is why you actually get a lot of anti-fans with Classic. You get a lot of people who don't like watching him play because he makes their favorite players look bad. And like, he's done this many times before. He's just a very smart guy, and I can't wait to see what he's got in store.
He definitely is. It's going to be a full best of 7. Roddy, final thoughts?
It's funny as well, because I agree with everything that Pig said there. Classic in this tournament, almost every single Protoss player has looked more legit than they've ever done. Everybody's playing so fair and honest and straight up, and it really comes down to execution and just who is better in the micro department. And then Classic starts off today, and we're expecting that, and then he just sells something that's not there, pretending that it's going to be a macro game, and just all-ins the heck out of Serral in game number 1 with nothing but Zealots, no probes behind it. Yeah, he's a master. He's got it all. He can be gimmicky, but if he's solid, he's so rock solid, so it's going to be so tough for Rogue.
And it's time to begin as we get things ready for the grand final here of the Intel Extreme Masters. It's all led up to this. Let's head over to Smix, who's on the stage.
We started with 76 players from all around the world, and after 5 days of action, it comes down to just 2. Katowice, are you ready? Up first, we have the best Protoss player in the world. He's looking to fulfill his dream of becoming a champion here in the Spodek Arena. While going up against him is the current reigning WCS Global Finals champion. He's on track to also become a world champion. Please welcome on stage, it is Classic and Rogue!
Rogue versus Classic here at the Intel Extreme Masters Grand Finals. Rogue just recently winning BlizzCon 2017. Classic here to take his crown.
This has been such an epic tournament. We've been here for about a week already. We've had 5 play days completed. This is the 6th, and coming down from over 70 players, these are the best 2 in the entire world.
This tournament truly unique, as it is such a marathon. You have to be good at every matchup on every map. These are the 2 players who have managed to get this far. In this best of 7, we should expect every type of possible game. You have to mix up so many different strategies if you're going to come out on top when you have that many different techniques you have to prove.
There's no question about that. When you have 7 maps against the other guy that's the best in the world at this game, well, you have to have that range, and both of them have shown it. We've seen a lot of decisive play from Classic. He's been aggressive more often than not, but I guarantee you he can play those longer games. He can keep up in the macro that Rogue is so well known for.
Classic, a player who was very dominant a few years ago, has now brought a completely new style. He's very aggressive. He knows how to get in there, do the damage, oftentimes deceiving his opponent. Rogue, the greatest StarCraft 2 late game player in the world. This is going to be an incredible match. Ladies and gentlemen, let's make some noise. We're here in the Intel Extreme Masters Grand Finals. Introducing our first player in the bottom right, in the blue, make some noise for Rogue! And his opponent here in the upper left, make some noise for Classic!
Backwater, a great map to start out a best of 7 on. You can easily take 3 bases. It's definitely a map that can go into the late game, but at the same time, there's a lot of ways to play a sneaky game, dropping your units all over the place, sneaking in from angles that your opponent doesn't expect. Anything could happen here in game number 1.
We already see Classic coming out now with a probe scout, trying to get an idea of whether or not Rogue is going to do anything sneaky early on. Now, as we've seen in previous games here from Classic throughout this week, he's done a lot of very aggressive strategies. He has builds that are engineered to completely outmaneuver his opponent. So Rogue is going to have to navigate this game very carefully if he's going to bring it to his strongest point, which is the late game.
Well, Rogue last year won 3 major tournaments: IEM Shanghai, GSL Super Tournament 2, and of course, BlizzCon, the WCS Global Finals. And the way that he navigated those tournaments, Tasteless, is as you are saying. He was so careful, so meticulous at figuring out what his opponents were up to.
He barely managed to get his way into BlizzCon and then tore through every opponent that stood in his way. A Classic so eager to prove himself with this new dominant style of Protoss. It's not SOS here. It's not Hero. It's not the players we are used to casting while we're back in South Korea. Here, Classic, just with a very altered approach to the game, he could easily dismantle Rogue. We're still waiting to see what exactly the builds are now that the core is done, and it will be a Stargate opening. So far, a fairly orthodox fork.
You are certainly right about that, but he makes it right in the wall, which is a bit interesting and a bit of a tell for Rogue. He sees immediately the second the Stargate starts that it is on the way, so he can prepare for it without issue. Now, the fact that the Stargate is in the wall probably tells Rogue that Classic wants to take his next expansion very, very quickly.
When the Stargate comes out, he can either make Phoenixes or Oracles. These are going to be important to harass, but he also needs to make sure and use them to scout. He needs to monitor how many drones versus attacking units Rogue's going to be making.
Now, this layer is so quick from Rogue. I'm very interested in this play. Classic popping up, seeing that the third base is on the way, but he could be caught off guard by just how quickly the layers started. Rogue might be doing a very aggressive play to try to counter what is likely to be a play from Classic, where he is trying to be greedy.
That's right. Even though Rogue has incredible late game abilities, he oftentimes will mix it up with a very specific style of rush, coming in there and trying to shut down Classic before he can do those great builds. And we're seeing exactly what that is right now.
That's right. We just saw that he canceled the third base after Classic saw it. So Classic sees that. He thinks it's a normal game. Oh, there is nothing further than a normal game from what we're seeing here. With that Nidus on the way, with additional Queens on the way, with a Roach Warren on the way, Rogue will be going all in.
We're going to have to see where exactly the Nidus Worm is going to come up. We've already seen Classic have some, Rogue have some success in this tournament with a strategy like this. The Overseer is coming up now. Many times before, we've seen Rogue actually do this right in front of the Nexus. It seems to be engineered that once the units get out, the Nexus is almost impossible to hold. We now have Rogue loading up the Nidus network, and we're going to see where exactly he's going to set this up. It might be right by the Robo Bay and the Nexus.
Yep, he is making it right there. He's going to want to target down that Robotics immediately. The Immortal, one of the main units at trying to stop this. You notice Classic making tons of buildings. He's going to wall off everything, throw down shield batteries, but they aren't going to finish until this Nidus is open.
The Nidus is now spilling out so many units. The Robo completely surrounded. If the Immortal does come out, it will surely be gunned down. Probes being pulled to try to assist in defending the base.
Well, the first Immortal does fall. The Robo gets unpowered. Another pylon finishes the probes. Out fighting. A Phoenix comes in, picks up a Queen. In comes the Oracle as well.
Transfuse is going down. The Oracle still with some remaining energy. We see more and more Roaches and Queens spilling out. If Classic is unable to hold this location, this game will end and it will be a victory here for Rogue.
Well, it's looking like it might be. Rogue dealing so much damage. 17 probes already falling, going after the army of Classic. He barely has anything left but frantically microing these Stalkers.
A few Stalkers in the back, but really nowhere to try to kite them. If he can get this pylon and possibly take it out, this will be an insta-win for Rogue.
Oh, he's trying right now to pick off absolutely everything. These pylons being picked off one by one. More units still coming through that Nidus for Rogue. Just so much damage being put on top of these Stalkers, but Classic is not giving up yet.
Classic trying to hang on right now. Ling's in the main, 28 probes already down. Classic still limping by. These Stalkers are all he has left to try to hang on, and Rogue is not slowing down with sending more units directly to this natural expansion.
It's looking almost hopeless here, and GG is called. Rogue takes a quick game number one.
Really awesome play by Rogue. Keep in mind, that's not a strategy he has to use again, but this denies Classic really getting any intel as we go into game 2 and 3. Classic, we never got to see his full strategy. With a rush like that, Rogue shuts down game number 1 handedly.
You know, this is something we've seen from Rogue throughout IEM Katowice. He's been throwing down a lot of Niduses, especially on that map. He's trying to get aggressive against greedy Protoss play. This Protoss play where you're trying to tech and you're trying to expand at the same time. Here, he punishes Classic. But believe me, Tasteless, Classic is going to get ready to punish him right back.
Classic now knows that Rogue has thrown out his all-in, his cheese strat. Will he actually try to do that again? I believe in an earlier series here at the Intel Extreme Masters, we saw a Rogue do it more than once, and that was just in a best of 5. This is a best of 7. Rogue still saving that late game style so that Classic doesn't get a taste of it just yet.
Yeah, he wasn't quite prepared, but I don't know if that's going to work again. It's a best of 7. You definitely can use the same strategy more than once. But when Classic sees it, he is going to be more ready the next time.
We now enter game number 2. Rogue with a 1-0 lead versus Classic. Again, this is a best of 7. As we go on to our second map, let's see what our 2 players are going to do. In the upper right, in the blue, make some noise for Rogue! His opponent in the bottom left, in the red. Give it up for Classic!
You know, a great tournament can't occur without a great staff. So I do want to give a shout out to IEM, to ESL, of course, our wonderful observers, Mapu and Indy. And a big shout out with much love to Sean Clark, also known as Apollo. Couldn't be here today, but without him, this would never have gone so well.
It's so true. There's so many people that work behind the scenes to make such an awesome event like this. And it's a real treat to kind of bring it now to an end. We're about to find out which of these two players is the very best in StarCraft 2 in the entire world.
It is very exciting because Rogue has already kind of staked that claim. As I've been talking about, he won a bunch of tournaments last year, including the big one, BlizzCon. But the thing is, we have two big tournaments every year. We have IEM Katowice and we have BlizzCon, where all the best players go. Everyone tries to qualify for these events, and of course, you are a big-time champion to win that. So if Rogue can pull this off, that's domination like we may have never even seen before.
Yeah, and especially with the proximity of these two tournaments as far as time goes. That's an incredible play. We saw Classic come out, make a pylon, and then cancel it back there. That's a bit curious. Now sending that probe back. It looks like the Overlord would have gone down there to spot it. So I guess that was a wise decision then for Classic if he was going to try to hide anything down there. A good call to then mix it up. Now, back in Classic space, we do see a Stargate just now starting. Keep in mind, in Game 1, it did end so fast, we didn't really get to see what kind of tech Classic wanted to do. Classic could very well have had his own all-in he wanted to try to pull off, like we saw him do in, I believe it was Game 1 against Carrol. But with a rush like what Rogue did, doesn't matter if what you wanted to do. You have to stop what Rogue does first.
Well, this game, you know, with that Stargate in the main base, it doesn't really signify anything in particular. He'll get some light harassment done with it. He'll get some scouting done with it. But from there, really anything could occur. So the next thing for us to watch is, can Rogue get on a really good scout? Will he sneak in some Zerglings? Hey, maybe he'll go ahead and get Overlord speed to try to scout. He needs to know what Classic is planning so he's not caught off guard like Carrol was.
We see a Phoenix speed made right away. Of course, this can scout. It will also be used to try to drive out Overlords. Without Rogue having the proper intel, there's really no way. You know, in StarCraft 2, a game of incomplete information, there's no way to know what your opponent's going to do for sure until you've spotted it. We'll see. Okay, excuse me. He gets an Oracle right after that Phoenix is done. So the Phoenix now looping down through the bottom of the map is trying to find any stray Overlords to block supply and just keep the map dark and scary here for Rogue.
Well, there's an Overlord in his main base, but the Phoenix not going there quite yet, just kind of scouting around. Looks like it will loop back to pick off that Overlord. The Overlord is seeing that there is a Robo on the way. That's the big piece of information that Rogue has picked up so far.
Okay, we now see Classic continuing to tech up. The Oracle needs to come in here and try to gun down some drones. Rogue's actually one of the best players at usually keeping almost all of his drones alive, basically preempting the Oracle's movement, excuse me, and trying to dodge those shots. Since the Oracle can kill the drones very quickly, like we just saw right there, he has to be super fast, or you can lose sometimes 3 or 4 drones in a matter of 2 seconds.
Well, that is Rogue in a nutshell. Look at this. You barely can get anything done. He gets 1 drone total. We see Rogue preemptively moving every drone, making buildings out of them, canceling later on when the Oracle leaves. He just doesn't want to take any damage here.
There is a Warp Prism being made. Now, he may use that to try to keep Rogue pressured, to keep Rogue trapped at his base, but it also can be a possible timing attack. We'll just have to see as the Templar Archive starts, and so does Zealot Legs.
Oh, very interesting. It looks like some Archon and Zealot harassment is likely to come out. Probably a 3rd base as well, but 4 Queens walking across the map. A Baneling Nest on the way, already +1 melee coming. That won't be done by the time the Queens get down there, though. This looks like it's going to be a very aggressive attack.
Artosis, Rogue is playing completely around what his stereotypical approach has been. We've typecasted him as a very conservative late-game player, and now he's been coming out with some pretty insane strategies. We saw the Queens go halfway across the map and then turn around. Interesting movement. I believe he might have, with his instincts, thought, okay, there's going to be a possible drop. We see the Queens going back and forth. I've never seen anything quite like this.
Yeah. This
in
isn't
7.5 years of casting StarCraft 2.
Queen's going back and forth here. Maybe some indecisive play out of Rogue, but he hasn't been able to spread creep. He hasn't hit all of his injects, possibly. Like, I'm not sure exactly what his plan is.
Well, he's going to need to deal with this first. An Archon drop harass can do a lot of damage, and the Queens are absolutely necessary to try to hit the Warp Prism and slow this down. We have Banelings coming up. Now the Warp Prism very low on HP, and it will barely manage to get away. Classic will have to proceed with caution from here on out, because if you lose that Warp Prism with the 2 Archons, you've lost all of your leverage in this phase of the game.
Oh, it's a brutal loss if you do end up losing. Archons are such an expensive unit, but he saves it, he gets out of there, and the game looks like it's gonna normalize a little bit, despite kind of some of these weird things we've seen. We've seen a pylon cancel early on in the middle of the map. We've seen 4 Queens kind of just walking around, taking in the sights of Blackpink.
It seems almost as though Rogue wanted to come out with a specific timing attack, realized that the Queens are going to move so slowly across the map that the Archon drop would start doing damage before Rogue could start what he had planned to do, so he goes back. And it seems for now we're going to a more middle-of-the-road Zerg versus Protoss approach. He's getting a Spire, he's just trying to spread his creep out, whereas Classic is now pumping out Immortals and getting Psionic Storm.
Yeah, these are the tools that he's really going to need against this Hydralisk Baneling style that's coming out of Rogue. But Rogue is also getting a Spire, so that can be a very tricky play. If your opponent isn't ready and you make some Mutalisks, you definitely can get a lot of damage done.
The Warp Prism has been pushed back pretty far. We're still waiting to see when that 5th base is going to be taken here by Rogue. Once he gets a certain economic engine set up, he really tends to explode out on the map. And a lot of times Protoss is, even someone like Classic, is just going to have a difficult time trying to leave his base. It's the worst feeling in the world when you're playing against a great Zerg player, is if you leave, you get overwhelmed and crushed. So Classic is going to try to come out at this exact moment. He needs to do enough damage. And with Psionic Storm finishing, there's a window of time where he could do that damage and try to slow Rogue down.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't know if he's going to go for a full-on attack. I mean, Rogue did take a 4th base, so there is an angle he could attack from where there's not creep yet. But still, this is a very hard place to attack. If you have a lot of Hydralisks and a lot of Banelings and you're standing on creep, that's something Protoss doesn't really want to touch.
It should also be noted that in very wide open areas, it's a lot harder to get a good angle for Protoss. You can get surrounded so easily, and then you can't optimize the damage you're doing with the Psionic Storm. A lot of times, with a Protoss unit composition like this, you want to fight in something that's more of a hallway, something where you can control the flow of your opponent's army. So when we saw Classic move out slightly on the map and then revert down to take a 4th base, we can call that putting on pressure, showing them your army, coming out a little bit, making them halt drones so they have to respect your army. They produce attacking units of their own, when really Classic is taking a fairly quick 4th base. Now Rogue's response is to expand on his own, and this is where Rogue is going to start getting bigger and bigger and bigger, as he's already close to maxing out.
And look at this, the Mutas flying out right now as Classic has taken a more defensive stance. The Mutalisks going into the main base. It looks like there's only a single photon cannon here. That won't hold them for long. Stalkers being warped in, but they aren't that afraid of Stalkers. Classic decides to go on a counterattack.
Yeah, Classic, instead of actually trying to defend his base where these Mutas could unpower these pylons, Classic going to try to come across the map and start smashing these expansions, but already Rogue winning the fight here in Classic's main.
Yeah, he's doing a good job. A lot of Stalkers being warped in. Those aren't units in his main army. Here we go. We see Classic microing here frantically as the Banelings roll in. He still has some Side Storms to deal with these Hydras, though, as he pushes them back.
We see a few more Banelings about to finish. The last Archon goes down. It's just Immortals and a few Templars remaining. But again, Immortals, the most robust unit in the game. He could still try to push through.
He's trying right here, but look at this. A stray Muta comes over, more Zerglings coming out, and he's in a lot of trouble. It looks like he might try to recall here. He does indeed, so tries to bring home as many units as he can, but only a couple Immortals and the Archon make it.
The Mutas have still done, or are doing now, so much damage, 23 probe kills. Rogue actually denied Classic from ever even getting close to a hatchery. The angling of his army was absolutely perfect, and now Classic has to clean up this Mutalisk mess before he's going to be able to move out on the map.
This is a very tough situation. He's even adding more Mutalisks because he's had such a good time with them so far. A single Phoenix comes out. It can theoretically fight these Mutas, but it's very hard. It's very speed intensive. You have to put so much of your focus in, so he's not going to be able to hunt those all down right now.
Look at the supply right now, Artosis. 188 to 106. Rogue is going to have the opportunity to attack into Classic possibly multiple times in a row. If Classic can survive the onslaught of Rogue's units over and over and over, he might have an opportunity to try to come back. In fairness to Classic, it's not easy to attack into Protoss. They have so many tools that they can use to try to help defend, especially from big ground armies. But I'm worried mathematically this may be an impossible comeback here for Classic.
It is a very, very difficult one, but we've seen crazy games. We'll see what Classic can pull out. But right now, he's defending the mutas reasonably well. The second pack coming over, he cleaned up the first and should be able to clean up the second. Rogue rolling out with the rest of his army, his Lings, his Banelings, his Hydralisks. But you know what? There's a lot of Psystorms, so maybe Classic can take a good fight.
This is signature Rogue play, making non-stop Banelings. The amount of damage that's going to be dealt in a few seconds is going to be huge. If Classic can't hold this off perfectly, this game could very well end.
Oh, he gets stasis right there as he rolls in. Banelings at the third base. Psystorms going down all over the place. Only a few Stalkers left over as the army gets on top.
We see more and more of Rogue's units beginning to spill in. The last Immortal goes down. Classic retreating, but decides to tap out. GG! Rogue now with a 2-0 lead.
Just phenomenal player. Play out of our world champion in Rogue. This guy is fresh off of his BlizzCon win at the Global Finals for WCS and looking poised to pick up IEM Katowice.
I have to say, we saw two very different approaches to the game there for Rogue. I do believe Rogue was trying to do some kind of timing attack. We saw those queens move out into the middle of the map, but Rogue with perfect instinct does come back, then denies that Warp Prism harass, gears up for a macro game, and just completely rolls over Classic. Now, Classic is under a lot of pressure because he has to win 4 games, whereas Rogue only has to take 2. Rogue has a lot more room to be creative, to try to do some more experimental builds, some more risky builds that might pay off.
Well, when you have a lead like that, you know, if he just does some kind of almost coin flippy builds, right? If he does some very dangerous tactics that have high risk and high reward, that can actually put Classic's mindset down the gutter.
We are now ready for game number 3. Rogue with a 2-0 lead over Classic here in the Intel Extreme Masters Grand Finals. In the bottom right, in the blue, make some noise for Rogue! He needs to begin his comeback now. Our Protoss player in the red. Give it up for Classic!
Both players no stranger to playing in front of a giant cloud for a lot of money and prestige, but I think this crowd is a little bit something else, Tasteless.
Certainly, it can be pretty daunting to play on a stage that's this huge. I want to point something out, Artosis. If Rogue wins here, he is undoubtedly the best player that we've seen in 6 months. He is the greatest in the world. To come and win BlizzCon and then win the Intel Extreme Masters, 2 marathon tournaments.
Yeah, like, okay, so there will be a string of, let's see, 4 or 5 tournaments in a row that Rogue will have won 4 of them. Just to put that in perspective. That is actually something that no one's done yet in StarCraft 2.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
You know, when we were casting Rogue in Korea over the last few years, he would have some of the best games we've ever seen, and then some of the worst games on a professional level we'd ever seen. He had a very, very bumpy road getting this far, but it seems like he's sanded down all those edges.
Yeah.
He's taken out all the kinks in his play, and now we have this awesome free-flow Zerg that can do a timing attack at the start of the game, but can also drag the game out to the very limits of StarCraft 2 and out-strategize his opponent.
Well, we've already seen just a fantastic cheese maneuver out of him with that 2-base Nidus play. He tricked Classic there and was able to kill him so quickly. And we've seen countless games from Rogue where it goes to 40 minutes, 50 minutes, sometimes even an hour, playing with every unit at Zerg's disposal.
We see once again Classic going for a Stargate opener. Now, that's still a very flexible build, but it's not one of the build forks where he would, for instance, try to skip going area units altogether and get very aggressive on the ground. So no matter what Rogue has thrown at Classic so far, Classic still says when he's in the most important tournament that you can be in, this is the opener he needs to stay with. This is the most likely play that can get him a victory.
And you know what? I think it probably is overall. In a best of 7, I feel like I want to see a Protoss do this at least like 4 times out of those 7 games. It's such a safe build. You can scout a lot with it. There's all sorts of aggressive plays you can follow up with as well. But it hasn't worked out yet here for Classic.
So the Adept is finally taken out. It is a 3-hatch play for Rogue. We also don't see any Zerglings just yet, so he's going to power up. We also have an Oracle that's going to be inbound, heading towards these bases. We saw in game number 2, Rogue had just a phenomenal play of trying to he just dodged so well with the drones. A lot of other players will lose always 4 to 6 drones whenever that Oracle gets there. But Rogue, he wants to keep every worker alive so he can suck up as many minerals on the map and get to that phase of the game where he's the best at.
Well, it is so important. If you take a lot of drone losses early, Protoss really can finish you off. Now here comes the Oracle, flies over that Spore. Looks like he gets just 1 drone kill, takes a lot of hull damage, so we'll have to back up and heal for a bit.
So the Phoenix is taking out the Overlord. I believe the Overlord does not complete a vision check here. I don't think the Overlord has actually seen this base back here. Now, a lot of pro gamers don't expand there for their 3rd base, even though it's easy and it's free. And the reasoning is because there's not a lot of minerals, but also you can always take that base later on. A lot of other players will take the base that we're getting a shot of right over here. That's a little bit riskier to take, but it's certainly not impossible to hold.
No.
So the fact that Classic expands back here may confuse Rogue. Since Rogue doesn't have confirmation of that Nexus, he might think there's actually a 2-base timing attack coming and get ready to defend against something that Classic's simply not doing.
It's really important for you to point that out, Tasteless, because if you do hit one of these very fast 2-base attacks and the Zerg isn't ready, the Zerg dies. We saw that in game 1 against Carrol from Classic with that gigantic Zealot all-in. But he's not going for that. He is macroing up. He is trying to get into the later game. And that's nice to see because on Neon Violet Square, if you live past the first few minutes, a lot of the time we go to maxed armies and huge fights.
The burden for Zerg in this matchup is to have, it sounds weird, but to have the bare minimum to hold off their attack if it's going to be a timing attack. Not way too much. You don't want to try to win more in a fight on the map because if you're winning by too much, then you don't have any workers. The rhythm for the economy of Protoss and Zerg operate differently. And Rogue is the very best in the whole world at trying to get a read on that. But even for him, this could be tough. If he can't identify what Classic's up to, he may misread this, and Classic can have a bigger army later on.
Yeah, very sneaky stuff for sure. Now, the Prism is out on the map. Looks like he wants to do some Archon harassment. We saw this previously. We see this a lot in Protoss vs. Zerg, just trying to clean up some Zerglings, see if you can get some kills on Queens, Overlords, Creep Tumors, anything like that. Meanwhile, a stasis war going down, but a good dodge there by Rogue. Only 1 drone getting frozen.
We've seen this technique used before here by Classic. Let's see if he does a better job with it this time around. Since the Archons are almost entirely shields, they can pick a lot of fights, kill off a lot of units, and as long as they don't actually get killed, they can get picked back up into the War Prism, their shields regenerate, and rinse and repeat. You keep doing that and trying to chip away and slow down the Zerg that's really trying to power up.
Well, he's warping in some more units at that Prism out on the map right now. Has some additional Zealots. Not sure exactly where those are headed. Maybe headed home right now, deciding that he doesn't want to fully commit. No, walking around, actually taking the long way, trying to avoid being spotted. It looks like he wants to hit the main base and the 3rd base at the same time.
It's very subtle, but Classic actually showed the Warp Prism, I believe intentionally, to the Hydras to keep them down there, where now these Zealots coming up here from the north can try to come in here and take out these Queens and drones.
Okay, charges in, but great micro by Rogue here, pulls the Queens back. In the meantime, Archons into the main base, only 4 Hydras there. They quickly take them out.
And here comes the actual attack, a huge warping inside the main. Rogue still scrambling to try to shut down this attack at his 3rd base. The Warp Prism low on shield, so is the Archon. He picks it up and backs out the moment he can't do any more damage.
You know what? This is pretty good at the third base as well. The Zealots going to town on these drones. It looks like they'll end up picking off 6, 7 drones before being taken out, as well as a couple queens there, as well as quite a few Hydras. And when you take a look at this unit's loss tab, you can see that this was very efficient for Classic.
Psionic Storm is almost finished, and I have to say, so far, this is the best game Classic has brought us in the Intel Extreme Masters Grand Finals. He's actually getting to a place where he wants to be. Remember, in Game 1, Rogue shut the game down before it really even started. And in Game 2, Rogue got to that point where he was so huge, he had managed to just smash Classic's army. But now I'm really liking the place that Classic has brought this game into. We're going to have to see if later on Classic can compete with that macro, try to push out, and start denying some of these exterior bases that Rogue most certainly will acquire.
Yeah, well, both sides seem to have enough right now that it's going to be hard to finish each other off. So they're both kind of expanding, continuing to get upgrades, working on their economy and their infrastructure. It's a bit of a lull in the action, but that action will kick up soon again.
Here comes the initial push. Now, Classic doesn't have to commit to this. Sometimes you'll see players push out a little bit and then edge back, hoping that they're halting some of the drone production. But seeing these Archons warp in right here, I think we may, in fact, see Classic commit.
There's definitely a possibility. His army is scary. As long as his Zealots don't connect into Banelings, he should be able to do some damage here. He's got a decent amount of Psystorm, and this army is certainly weak to Psystorm.
That's right, especially the Hydralisks. We have additional Banelings coming up here. Classic looking for an angle to fight where he thinks he can actually win. Again, every second that passes, Rogue is getting bigger and bigger. Surprisingly, Classic is managing to fairly compete with a supply here of Rogue, which is a rare thing to actually see. He's coming up here from the top. I do feel like Rogue is in a pretty good position, but it's all going to come down to how these Sonic Storms are executed. Oh my God! Huge Baneling attack there, taking out so many probes, and now the main attack starts.
Oh, the Banelings roll into a lot of these Zealots, some Archons as well, but this should be held by Rogue. Still, Classic pushing back those Hydras right now, but after getting rid of the High Templars, after clearing out a lot of the Zealots efficiently, this was a quality engagement for our Zerg player.
Yep, Rogue manages to hold that off. We see Classic battered and bruised, moving back across the map, and taking out those workers right before that fight means overall, Rogue had a very good exchange, and now Rogue's getting to that phase that he wanted to be in. He's teching up, he's macroing up, and we're gonna have to find out if Classic can keep expanding, or we may end up in game number 4 here with Rogue in a 3-0 lead.
Well, after Rogue kills off an army that size and has this many bases, this many drones mining for him, he goes right up to Hive, he adds a Spire. He wants to go into Broodlord tech, which can just punish a ground army like what Classic has. Now on Classic's side, he has to decide, Tasteless, does he go and attack again, or does he tech up himself?
Okay, we have the push coming out now. We just saw Rogue assert himself on the map. He's taking the bottom gold base right over in this location. Now, Classic has to respond somehow. You really can't play a passive game. Either Classic has to try to grow on his own, or has to attack, or maybe do a little bit of both. We're seeing Classic, he's about 3/4 of the way to getting maxed out. Again, Rogue actually staying very steady and even in supplies here. He's really respecting the army that Classic keeps coming out on the map with.
Yeah, he does not really want to fight right now. He'd love to get those Broodlords out and really just punish the Archons, Immortals, and Zealots. But Classic is not going to have it. He is moving across the map right now. He has a massive army. It is such a strong one, but he has to micro it correctly.
We are getting to the tipping point here. Another small and cost-efficient counterattack. It looks like Classic already prepared for that. The Lings instead move down over to this location where the cannons don't quite cover those probes.
In the meantime, he attacks into the main army here of Rogue. He's on creep, so Rogue's defense should be strong. Great Psystorms going down. The Banelings rolling into Archons and getting picked off, and now the Zealots and High Templars join the battle.
We have an impressive arc here from Rogue, but it seems like Classic has broken through, losing only 7 probes, but the main push from Classic comes forward.
The Zealots have to turn around as they get too far ahead of the rest of the army. The High Templars being harassed a bit here. He needs to cast Side Storms, and he does, all over those Hydras, forced to retreat once again.
Most importantly, the gold base was shut down. Rogue has to look for another opportunity. It's important for the Zerg to always stay ahead of expansions when playing against a Protoss. If you see even bases on both sides, that means in the long run, Zerg is going to lose.
Wow, that was a crazy couple of fights right there. A great job by Rogue continually trying to harass, but Classic just bringing so much force into these battles. What tech are we on now? It looks like that Greater Spire is making, maybe he started it a little bit late because of the battles, but at the same time, we have Tempest tech on the way.
That's right, we're moving into high-tech air units here. Rogue is actually expanding in 2 locations at once. We see one in the very far upper right. And already Classic's going to try to respond to that. I think this actually will be forced to cancel. Great play there by Classic. The other expansion that we have is down in the bottom center, the gold base. Rogue really wants to get that up and running because with all those extra minerals, he can then take more bases, keep making more links to do counterattacks. But Classic's definitely going to be eyeing that location throughout this entire game. I think we're going to have a lot of points of tension in that bottom center location.
Oh, Rogue actually finds a hole in the wall in the middle of it all and gets these Zerglings in, going to that back expansion, fighting at the front as well. An instant recall from Classic. He's not taking any risks dealing with these Zerglings.
But with that recall going back, we now have an attack here from Classic, and there's really nothing to defend, an instant cancel. Both these players doing an excellent job trying to control the rhythm and pace of this game.
Well, if you can deny those expansions even for a little bit, it really cuts into the bank of your opponent. We can see neither one of these players have over 1,000 minerals or 1,000 gas, so if they lose their army, they can't replace it quickly.
Rogue now with basically map control. Also note where the creep is, if we can get a wide shot, this area is going to be a very easy access point for Rogue to push through. He doesn't have a lot of creep at the top. This may be simply because Classic has not really given much attention to the top, so Rogue's devoting everything down here. But I think for Rogue specifically, he wants to try to push into this center left location. Classic needs to get down here and try to deny some of this creep because Zerg units being so fast on creep, they always end up with favorable exchanges.
It really makes a gigantic difference. Not only that, they can see the opponent's army when there's a creep tumor nearby, so it's very tough on that engagement. But we are entering the next phase of this game. You see the air upgrades coming. There's already some Tempests out. There's Broodlords on the way right now as well.
You can see now with these Lings attacking the Cybernetics core, this air upgrade could actually be denied. The Archons come back, saving that for now. There's also a chance Rogue expands even further, identifying, okay, he's teching up to air. The air units for Protoss, especially Tempest and the Mothership, are very slow.
Yes, they are very, very slow, but they deal with Broodlords so well. So the Broodlords of Rogue might not be that useful right now. He's not morphing a whole lot of them, but well, he has an okay number still. He can punish the Archons and try to keep those High Templars back with this unit.
Okay, Classic now coming down. He wants to have that engage on the bottom base. Now, there's always a chance Rogue tries to attack somewhere this air army's not. The air army is quite slow, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing here. These Lings just out of vision of where Classic is. But Classic seems to be ready for an attack like this. The Banelings coming forward into the front. They will be able to detonate on these Zealots, and now a surrounder on the Archon. A good warp in. This counterattack has been denied, but it's also intimidating Classic enough into trying to turn around and keep his bases safe.
It's really a great move by Rogue because most Protoss players won't leave an Archon, 2 Zealots, 3 cannons at that wall, but Classic knows Rogue so well that he was ultimately prepared. But again, that didn't really cost Rogue too much.
I've just had 15 more drones hatching. This puts Rogue up to almost 90 drones in this game. That means that Rogue is going to be taking in so much of an income, he could remake an army over and over and over. And we see Classic just now getting to that point in time. Notice the gas banked up here. Classic at 1.4K gas, Rogue getting very close to 1,000. That's important because the gas is going to let you make those very high-tech and efficient tech units. So if there's a big exchange, they need to then remake all of those.
Yeah, the later we get into the game, the more important things like spellcasters are. Trying to trade mana for damage on your opponent so you can regenerate that. And you notice he's flying around right now with some drops, trying to harass. We saw a storm drop over to the other side, and Classic is just looking for damage anywhere he can get it.
We also see a Warp Prism harass going on. Note that Classic's not trying to push through and actually crush Rogue. He's just playing a game where he denies the expansion, goes back, waits for Rogue to spend his resources, trying to reclaim that. Classic then comes back and crushes it again. And that's all that Classic has to do. Now, this may become more problematic as Rogue probably devotes further and further attention into the upper right quadrant, which really hasn't been a point of interest so far in this game.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point, that these bases, no one's even thought about them quite yet. They're so far away, and both of these armies are way slower than the armies we saw before. Before, you could just run across the map and get things done, but these slow air units, they shoot from so far away, they do so much damage, but they trade their speed for that.
It seems almost as though Rogue was confident if the game went long enough, he would actually end up taking over the entire lower half of the map, but Classics had such good defense, denying almost every counterattack we've seen. That has not been the case.
Oh, a couple Corruptors actually flying in here, not really getting anything done. Meanwhile, a Hydralisk counterattack here up into the natural expansion. I don't think he's going to be able to do anything there either, though.
But at the bare minimum, he's keeping Classic from ever leaving this left side of the map. Classic really is trying to drag this game out. And again, this is where Rogue is at his best.
Yes.
Is when you have the map split in half, you're mining resources everywhere, you have every tech tree imaginable, and here comes that push from Rogue. If Rogue can take out the 2 bases in the lower left, I think this game will end with a victory. But if Rogue doesn't, a counterattack from Classic could end it with a Protoss win.
Still trying to harass here. Classic finding less and less damage, but you've got to check if your opponent is playing honest. Is he leaving those Hydralisks in his main base? Is he watching his mini-map for little drops like this? And the thing is, Rogue is, or otherwise he wouldn't be a world champion.
So, Rogue has some of those Spore Crawlers across the map. He's waiting for the air army to try to come close. Now, this is an almost impossible wall here to break air-wise from Classic. So Classic has to make some tough decisions. Again, with that air army being slow, the upper right could be a good location for Rogue to try to take up even more bases. I'm not really sure what the game plan is going to be for Classic here. It seems like, there we go, Warp Prism's being shut down. The air army is enough to keep Classic alive, but how does he actually take Rogue down?
Well, this is tricky, isn't it, right? Because you've still got units that were very powerful earlier in the game that you haven't been able to trade in yet. For instance, things like Immortals, like Zealots. The later we get, the less effective those might become against what Rogue is making. But does he try to throw those away and build a new army?
One dilemma for both sides here, since they're going for air, is that Broodlords are not fast, nor are Tempests in the Mothership. So that means that if you move out with that big army, they can always try to counterattack into you. So I think they're almost both pressured to continue this arms race in this tension point just down here between the bottom left base and this Spore Crawler wall. And it's an inevitability that eventually that Spore Crawler wall is going to get in reaching distance of those bases of Classic, and that's when Rogue can really start chipping away at him.
Well, right now it looks like Rogue wants to utilize his ground army in a massive drop. If he can drop into the main base and kill a bunch of the tech of Classic, that could be a strong move. It's hard to rebuild your infrastructure. It takes a bit. He has those Overlords set up. Did Classic see that as he flew by, though?
So we have Warp Prism easily going down. And with the drops available, he can always try to go into that main and force Classic to go up there and address that. Because even if it's, oh wow, great Baneling connect there and actually come in and even getting some workers. So this may trigger the actual big attack. We have Rogue doing a huge drop here in the main. If Classic loses his main, he won't be able to produce any units. He'll have to start from square one. And while this is happening, Rogue should be hitting the bottom left.
Yes, I think this could force a recall. If he recalls his entire army, that bottom left can be killed by Rogue. A strong move is his army gets recalled for the most part, so this is enough to clean that up, but now Rogue should be attacking somewhere else.
Okay, we have the Hydras coming down now, as well as some Vipers getting into this location, but it looks like he might just barely have enough Broodlords, though, hitting the bottom. Classic needs to save both of these bases.
It is so important that he saves them. It looks like this one is saved for the time being. Another recall goes off before that mothership dies. He gets back a ton of units and now has to go and clean up the Broodlords as well.
Incredible play by Classic here in this game of cat and mouse. Classic actually manages to save both of those expansions. Rogue going back now has to reproduce and try again.
Wow, that was a really great couple of moments from both sides for Rogue to set up this three-pronged attack, drawing so many units in the main base, then hitting other locations so far away. It was really a brilliant move, but Classic perfectly splitting his units and keeping all of his bases up and alive.
Rogue, a very smart move here. He just starts to expand further and further. If Rogue mines out more of the map than Classic does, it's going to be pretty hard to imagine a situation where Classic has the resources resources to then end this in a game that's even longer than the one that we have here now. The Spore Crawler wall, again, getting closer and closer and closer. I don't know if Classic can come out and try to take this out. If the Spore Crawler wall is destroyed, Rogue loses all control of the bottom part of the map.
Yeah, that would be a really big problem, but he has a lot of spores that you have to get through. In the meantime, Zergling's running around, seeing if they can find some damage, but Classic leaving a few warp-ins so that he can get units there in time to defend.
Again, every time these probes are taken out, he's going to have to go back and remake some more. Ling's coming in again. Any tech structures he gets to is just something to try to slow down Classic. The Spore Crawlers now within vision of this base. If the Broodlords can get on top of it and get a good engage, the ground buildings are going to be decimated in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, he's dealing some damage to it over and over and over. Classic is shooting his volleys and gaining some value here, but here comes Rogue coming in, grabbing a couple of these Tempests, abducting them into his army and killing them off in seconds.
Excellent harpooning here, taking out a good amount of that ground army. Of course, with those spores over there, they can take out all those air units. And huge play, 34 workers killed off, making our worker count 30 to 71. Rogue really starting to seize this game.
Rogue making it look easy. Classic has played fantastically, but these moves from Rogue are so difficult to fight against. He's all over the place, and if you make a mistake for a second, he is going to punish you.
Rogue's getting closer and closer to damaging that Nexus. The bottom left Nexus remains in this game, but it's not really being mined from. It's just a territory that Classic controls, but he's not able to utilize it just yet.
And you can see that really reflected in Classic's income here. He doesn't really have that much compared to Rogue. Rogue is starting to build a very big bank and can replace his units whenever he loses them.
So that Nexus goes down, and I can't imagine a situation where Classic will hold on to the very bottom left for much longer. And I think we may be slow crawling to the end here of game number 3. With Rogue having so much map dominance, I think Classic has to try to push out, maybe even get in a situation where they both start killing each other off, and Classic has an overall stronger army and could win there.
I think you're right about that, actually. If he moves out right now as he is, and he can deal some massive damage, Rogue might have to follow him. Look at this, Rogue turning around. He's sending his army to try to intercept this, but Classic might actually have a stronger set of units when they're out in the open.
Classic now totally changing the direction this game's going. We still have an abandoned base down in the bottom left, but Classic's now going to try to expand and fight for control in a little bit of the center and also the upper right.
Uh-oh, what's happening here? He's hitting one of these bases. Looks like Rogue has come back with the rest of his units, but isn't able to save that top right base.
We have a recall now going back home. And I think with his DT here, he should still be able to keep this expansion alive. Again, though, no probes mining back there. Classic is trying to play the game that Rogue is really the best at, a late, drawn-out game. And, hey, this is a huge play. Out-positioning Rogue here. He's going to try to tear down these Spore Crawlers. Such a big investment here for Rogue.
It's really important that he gets rid of as many of these as possible. The Corruptors coming back with the Vipers. The Broodlords, of course, a bit slower, lagging behind. He can't fight these ground units without them.
Okay, so Classic and a pretty big victory actually takes that out, really weakening the overall air army of Rogue. You want to utilize those Spore Crawlers since they don't cost any supply or anything like that. It's just extra damage to take on that army for the Protoss. So really good job drawing those Broodlords back out and then looping around and punishing.
This is just such masterful play coming out of Rogue. Classic's doing everything he can to try to come back into this game, but Rogue just suffocating. Look at this, an abduct on an Archon, continuing to deal damage to this army. A blink forward from Classic. He's trying to force a fight.
Yeah, it looks like Classic's going to be going for it. Storming and coming forward now. We still have Templars zoning out a lot of these air units. If Classic can get underneath these Broodlords and take them out, the rest of the air army for the Zerg is useless.
Oh, the Void Ray's dealing a huge amount of damage, but parasitic bombs going down. They're taking so many hits. The Broodlords knocking out so many Archons, but at the end of the day, Rogue pulls back, waiting for reinforcements.
It should be noted that Rogue is switching his tech now. He's pumping out Ultralisks, and that's going to be it. Classic identifies there's no way he's going to win that game. And Rogue now has a 3-0 lead.
This is wild. After the just amazing games that Classic has been showing, how can Rogue be up 3-0?
I can't believe Classic has not managed to dismantle Rogue once. we, I think, are looking at now the new best player in the world on a completely different level than we've ever seen in StarCraft 2.
It can't be compared. Without a doubt, if Rogue ends up taking this down, and maybe even if he doesn't, he's the best player on the planet. This is a dominating experience that he's showing us here.
But it's not over yet. If Classic can somehow use all the information that Rogue's given him and start engineering strategies and builds, timing attacks, the way he moves his army, maybe he can start that comeback. But it's a hard one to imagine, Artosis.
Yeah, it's very difficult indeed. But you know what? Classic, he doesn't really panic under pressure. I'm very interested to see what he'll have in his next game.
I would imagine we will not have a very long match that Classic plans out. I think Classic wants to go for a much quicker game and try to end this before we get to that really strong late game Rogue.
All right, well, before we get into that next game, let's throw it over to Kaelaris and see what the other guys are thinking about this series so far.
That's right, thank you very much, of course. Classic at the moment, the gentleman who come into the tournament and was cool, calm, and collected throughout every single phase of his tournament run is now under jeopardy. One game away from complete elimination here at the Intel Extreme Masters World Championship. And I've got to ask you guys, looking at how we're seeing Rogue play this out at the moment, Classic has looked phenomenal throughout the whole tournament, Rotterdam, but he just can't quite eke things out here.
Rogue is outplaying a guy who has literally been outplaying everybody throughout this tournament. And even in the qualifiers leading up to this tournament, the Korean qualifier is probably the toughest one to win, obviously.
Yep.
Classic has looked untouchable, and what Rogue is doing here in this series to Classic, especially that last game, I mean, the first game, it's kind of like, we've seen that Nidus build before. And if you can get the first Immortal, then it's most likely going to work. The second game, you're like, okay, he's making some really good moves at this point. And the one thing that I really feel that Classic has shined at this week are obviously these battles where he has the Prism, he picks up the Archons, and Rogue is so good in just throwing Classic off his game. Every time right before the big fight, it's like, surprise, here are 4 Banelings, surprise, here are 9 Zerglings in your middle line. You look away for a split second, and the fights just don't go the way that Classic has been executing them all week long, because he's distracted to begin with.
We saw him dominate Serral in the previous round, but this is just Rogue stepping up to a whole other level compared to what Classic had to deal with in his previous round. It's incredible.
You know, similar to in the previous series, Rogue said that to get, back in that series, he had to get under Maru's skin. He needed to find a way to put some pressure on. And I think this is one of the big strengths for Rogue even before he became a championship player.
Yeah.
His ability to pick out these odd timing attacks, to throw out that Nidus Worm, a very cheeky build in game number 1, get a bit of a psychological edge, get some momentum, but then to back that up with this third game. You know, I think 2 games in a row he kind of got some edges using some very clever plays, but the third game, he was in an even footing. This is a straight up game, and he looked unstoppable in that late game. Such a hard puzzle to solve. Protoss in the late game, when they've got that air army up, there's cannons all over the place. They're recalling to reposition.
Right.
Rogue is a mastermind. He's solved the puzzle, and at this point, he's looking unstoppable.
It's just crazy. What he did in that last game, the way that Rogue was able to find openings over and over and over again with links and run-bys, how he shut down every single Prism that had Zealots in it or even High Templars, how he shut down the attacks, and in a weird way, he's keeping Classic so busy that it somehow allows Rogue to go for a Doom Drop in the base of Protoss. Like, it's supposed to be the other way around. He's supposed to be able to defending against like 24 Zealots while he has all those spores. That last game was one of the most impressive things I've seen this week.
Well, so he talks about Classic a lot here, but Rogue on the other side of things, we saw him take the WCS Global Championship at the end of 2017, and now he's on the verge of becoming a World Championship here at the Intel Extreme Masters. Pig, this is on another level. This is unprecedented from what we've seen from StarCraft 2 so far.
If he is to come back here, this will be such an epic run. Already today, he was down 0-2. He came back. If he can come back now and win this, it would be beyond anything. You know, as you said, not only the championship title, but the way he's going to have to get there. It's an uphill climb.
Right.
It's just great play. You know, for Classic to actually get back in it, it's going to be really hard. But Rogue, he's just on form.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It's time to head back to the commentary team now as we see if Rogue can round things out or if Classic can make the comeback.
This has been an incredible series so far. I do not think that Rogue excuse me, I do not think that Classic can actually go for a long game here. I think he needs to be very precise with his timing attacks. But the problem is that's kind of predictable, right?
You would think so,
Yeah.
but it's Classic. He can make something like that work, I think. But right now, Rogue, I mean, he's looking completely unstoppable. This is such a period of domination for him in the last 6 to 8 months that we've never seen anything like it. And the fact that he is up right now 3-0 against Classic, I don't even know what else to say.
If Classic can come back, it'll be the craziest comeback I have ever seen. We are now entering game number 4. Let's get hype. Let's make some noise. In the bottom right, in the blue, he is Rogue! His opponent in the upper left, in the red, he needs the greatest comeback in all of esports. Give it up for Classic!
This is really the moment where we figure out what Classic does when he's up against the ropes. It's been a tough series. He's down 0-3. He does not want to leave this main stage without winning a single game.
So the probe comes out here to deny that hatchery. Really, Classic trying to seize control of this game early on. If you leave Rogue unattended, Classic is going to get, excuse me, if you leave Rogue unattended, Rogue is going to get too big. He's going to get out of hand. He's going to be growing everywhere, taking too much of the map, and you lose in the late game. So Classic is coming in here trying to monitor, okay, where are you expanding? I don't want you to take that. I want you to go to a different build now.
Yes.
Trying to deny that in any way possible. He sees now, okay, a hatchery's over here. The probe will probably go back into the main, try to monitor how many lings are coming. Classic needs a perfect read. Otherwise, I think Rogue's going to close this out, Artosis.
Well, so far he is kind of dictating the flow of this game, and that's a good thing because this map, a Biogenesis, it's our smallest map. It's generally our most aggressive map because of that. So I would imagine Classic has something deadly prepared here for Rogue.
Ling speed started. Let's also keep in mind Artosis, and I think we're about to see that right now. I was about to say, Rogue already won some games by not going into the late game. So he has room to experiment. With a 3-0 lead, you can do something crazy. You can take a risk. And we're seeing that from Rogue right here, right now. This is not going to be a macro game.
No, it certainly is not. To get circling speed already and go into a Roach Warren, there's definite aggression coming out. A Queen starting to walk out. That could go to the other hatchery, or it could go across the map for air defense because we see a Stargate on the way.
The Roach Warren is almost finished. Keep in mind that Stargate's actually part of the wall in here, which means that could be picked off. This may be something that Rogue got a read on early on and now wants to come in here and punish. And actually the first 4 lings slipped through.
Ooh, kind of a nice move there by Rogue when the Adept is out of position, splitting his lings up, of course. An Adept can kill 4 slow lings pretty easily. But you know what? He's keeping him busy chasing these lings while Rogue is making a ton of aggressive units.
That's right. More roaches coming out on the map. There is a Void Ray on the way that can be used to try to help defend this attack. But again, Rogue is going so all in here. He may hit this expansion so hard that there's nothing Classic can do.
But a Void Ray is so good against roaches. I don't know how he's going to make this actually work out. The roaches can go up and start hitting the wall, but we already see a shield battery. He sees roaches are coming. And with that Void Ray, I mean, as soon as you turn it on, the damage is immense.
We do have that 1 battery coming up here. The Adept is taken out. Every unit is so important right now. We see Rogue coming up here. He sees that the Void Ray is is now hitting some of these roaches. He's going to try to bust through immediately. We see Rogue come inside, and now these lings surrounding some of these probes. The roach is trying to avoid the Void Ray.
Trying to deal a lot of damage. The Void Ray obviously dealing a ton from the sky. Classic microing his best here, trying to stem the flow of damage. More Zerglings coming up. It looks like this Ravager will be picked off as well.
And at the last second, more lings spill in. 2 Void Rays scrambling to try to come up here and protect the probes in the main.
The probes being drilled right now. They're going to have to fight, I would say. Rogue making some more Ravagers. More lings coming up as well, going right through that wall. But an Adept pops out to block the rest.
The problem right now is that he needs to get this wall in set up because otherwise lings will continue to stream in. Void Rays are not great against lings. There's just too many in such a high number.
Oh, the Lings continue to flow in here. The probes fighting. 10 of them have fallen already, but still an okay worker count for Classic. Rogue has barely anything behind this.
That's right. If Rogue does not manage to end this game quickly, Classic is going to be in a more comfortable position. We see it's 20 workers to 23, so fairly even. But that initial rush, if it doesn't close it out, Zerg's just in an awkward position on the opposite side of the map.
Wow, having to drone at this point after all of that aggression, the game is going to slow down a bit. But you know what? Looking at it, Tasteless, I kind of like this for Classic. He's killed off a ton of units. He still has an okay count of probes, and all these flying units, these Void Rays, the Oracle, they're going to come over across the map and do a lot of damage.
Let's see if Rogue is ready. With these air units, it's possible for Classic to split Rogue, where Rogue can't go from his main to his expansion. And I think that's what we're seeing the beginnings of here right now.
Well, he's going to pick off that Spore that was making the Queen, taking some damage, has to walk back to the Spore. Some of these drones going to be picked off as well. You forget sometimes that Void Rays can kill off drones, but he's going to do anything he can to gain some value with these units.
We still have some more Oracles coming up here as well. I mean, right now, Classic really leaning on Rogue. Rogue is this is quite a Rubik's Cube to solve for Rogue, and the position that he's in, this is just not what a proper Zerg versus Protoss game looks like, and that's all because Rogue took that risk and did that rush really early on.
Well, here he comes in, going after the Spore. The two Oracles coming in, getting targeted down. Great targeting by Rogue, but these Void Rays might not be stopped, taking out all of this anti-air.
That last Spore goes down. Now it's just the Queen, and it looks like Rogue may end up losing his main. Without his main, there's really no way to get back into this game. We see the Queens without Creep connected, trying to get back to save anything that's left over here, and it looks like Rogue barely manages to do that.
Ooh, the Void Ray barely getting away. Just 9 health left right there, but it does get out. Its shields will come back as well, and you see the pains Rogue is going through trying to defend against this with his expansion so far away.
I gotta say, that's a stellar hold there by Rogue. I actually was so confident that game was going to end when the Void Rays actually got into the main, but Rogue is hanging on. The problem, though, is that Classic did not lose momentum while doing that attack. That's not risky like the attack we saw there from Rogue. And in fact, really, Classic didn't even lose that much. We have a second Stargate that was made, so it's now 2 Oracles at a time, a Robo coming in. Classic's tech is looking immaculate.
Yeah, and really, Rogue doesn't have that much. Look at this, coming in, targeting down the Queen with the most energy. It gets transfused a couple times, but gets picked off. He's trying to kill as many flying units as he can, and to be honest, doing an okay job. 2 Oracles and a Void Ray fall.
So they've been driven out. Rogue is beginning to stabilize. He's going to get that 3rd base, and Zerg have to have 3 bases if Protoss have 2. The problem is that Classic's been sitting very comfortably for a while, and he's not going to stop attacking. Every time we see Classic attacking a Rogue, Rogue has to spend his resources on defending and not building a stronger economy.
Well, right now, Rogue is just trying to defend everything with Queens, and if he can pull that off, that's pretty nice. It'll really kind of transition well into that later part of the game. But here he goes, the Queen's coming out. He pulls back to the Spore as the air units dive on top of him. Not enough energy for transfuses, so he's really having to utilize this Spore to its fullest.
So far, so good here for Rogue. He's driving away these air units, a lot of them leaving very bruised. We do have Immortals coming up here, and it appears as though Classic has no intention to slow down with his Oracle production in this game. Classic now taking a 3rd, which I think he should be able to defend pretty easily when these Oracles get back here.
Yeah, I think he will, but you know what? He might have to keep the Oracles at home a little bit longer. He doesn't have that many ground units, and with all these Lings coming out, more coming from Rogue's base as well, that Nexus could go down.
There's really no way to easily address the number of Oracles that are coming out on the map. And when you make a mistake against a lot of Oracles at once, everything you have dies. So you have to really know how to preempt the engage. We see Rogue continuing to send Lings out here. The best he can hope for is to try to deny this Nexus.
That's a big deal if he denies it. Where are those Oracles right now? He is adding up the damage there. It looks like the Warpins will defend against the Zerglings, but more Lings are being made and so many Queens.
Here we go. The Oracles are coming in. A lot of Queens here to defend, and in fact, Rogue seems to have enough. Instead, Classic goes down now into the main to see if there's an opening here. Pushed out from there. and I think the third base might not be accessible either. So this is, I gotta say, just a crazy hold overall here by Rogue.
The defense of Rogue truly is immaculate. Just the amount of queens he's making, now he's making some roaches as well. There's no doubt in my mind that Rogue is gonna go for one final attack here. Zerglings, roaches, maybe a few Ravagers, and definitely a lot of queens.
I think you're 100% right, Artosis. If Rogue can try to push out and stop this third base, then I think he's got a shot. Otherwise, Classic's just going to continue to outreach him economically and strategically in this game. The Oracle's looking for an opening here. They may be needed, more importantly, to try to defend in this attack that could come here from Rogue. We see it headed northbound right now.
Look at those queens. They walked as far as they could on the creep, now getting off it. They're going to walk up this hill very slowly, but quite surely as well. Roaches and Ravagers coming along, and the ground army of Classic is actually very small.
The Oracles have spotted the queens now pushing up. We have Ravagers getting into position here, and it looks like it's actually going to be an attack on the entrance of the second base, where all the critical tech for Classic is.
Okay, Classic has to deal with this perfectly, and he can win this game. Some Biles going out, getting rid of the force fields as they come down. Very patiently throwing down force fields, trying to deal with these Lings. A lot of damage coming out from Rogue, though.
We see Rogue scrambling to try to push forward. The Oracles have been activated. The Protoss army is beginning to thin out as more Ravagers are being made.
Oh my God, Rogue! This could be a huge comeback. So many units. The Queens dealing huge amounts of damage. The Oracles all cleaned up. A few Immortals left. Juggling with the Prism Air. Classic tries to hold.
Absolutely insane. He's actually managed to breach into the second base. There's only 3 Immortals and an Archon remaining against so many of Rogue's units.
He's trying so hard here. You see Classic. He is breaking a sweat at this point. More Zealots coming in. The Queens, they're getting low on energy. Can Classic clean up this attack?
I don't think he can. The Immortals are getting lower, and it looks like that's it. GG! Unbelievable Rogue with a 4-0 victory over Classic. Give it up for your Intel Extreme Masters World Champion!
Congratulations, Rogue. What a phenomenal 4-0 series from you. Not only are you the current reigning WCS Global Finals champion, you are now also the Intel Extreme Masters World Champion. Please tell us, what does this mean for you?
일단 너무 축하드리고요. 블리즈컨 우승자도 됐는데 오늘은 월챔까지 우승자 됐어요. 지금이 무슨 느낌인지 얘기해 주세요.
일단은 진짜 생각지도 못했고 이렇게 빨리 솔직히 블리즈컨 직행이 되니까 너무 마음이 편해지고 너무너무 행복한 것 같아요.
He says, I really did not expect this. I didn't come into this expecting this at all. I'm just so happy right now that I have a direct road to the WCS Global Finals again this year. It just makes me so happy. And he just kind of implied it himself. He didn't expect that it would be such a quick 4-0. Let's talk about that fourth game because you came at win with an all-in and it looked like it could possibly fail. How were you able to close it out and make it a 4-0?
그 네 번째 경기에 대해서 물어보고 싶은데 올인을 했는데 이제 막을 것 같았는데 드디어 그 끝판에는 이겼어요. 어떻게 해서 이길 수 있었나요?
일단은 3대0 상황이 되니까 원래 제가 진 게임인데 도우 형이 좀 급하셨던 것 같아요. 그래가지고 기회가 온 것 같고 어차피 저는 3대0 상황이니까 마음 편하게 그냥 이거 저도 다음 판 이기자는 생각으로 그냥 했는데 그게 더 잘 됐던 것 같아요.
He says, I was in a 3-0 situation, and so I decided to just go for it. And honestly, I really thought that I had lost that game, but I think Classic was just in a bit of too much of a hurry, and I think that he got a little impatient there, and that's why I was able to win that game. I was feeling, honestly, like, just very comfortable and looking forward to that next match, but luckily I was able to win, and it's a 4-0. And now, Rogue, you have so many fans watching from all around the world, and also here in the Spodek Arena. What do you have to say to all of them?
이제 팬들이 엄청 많이 응원하고 있는데 여기 폴란드에서도 많고, 그래서 그 팬들에게 한마디 해주세요.
일단 진짜 너무 많은 팬들이 응원해 주셔서 이런 무대에서 게임하는 건 처음인 것 같아요. 블리즈컨 무대보다 더 큰 것 같고 너무너무 행복하고 너무 감사드립니다.
He says, I'm so happy right now. I think it's my first time playing on a stage in front of so many fans like this. I know that I won at BlizzCon, but I feel like this stage is even bigger, even grander, and you guys in the audience have been cheering so passionately, so thank you guys so much. Congratulations again, Rogue and Katowice. Once again, give it up. Your Intel Extreme Masters champion is Rogue!
Phenomenal scenes here from the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice World Championship. The global finalist champion, Rogue, is able to claim himself the Intel Extreme Masters World Championship, $150,000, the honor of that trophy right there, and also a ticket to the 2018 WCS Global Finals. Rogue has set himself atop the mountain above all else against Classic, 4-0s in the grand final. What an ultimate performance from that man right there. Nobody can compete with Rogue. A spectacular series, a spectacular tournament that we've been able to see from Rogue. What an astonishing victory for him here. We are back at the analysis desk continuing things on, but overall it's a monumental achievement here that Rogue has been able to do, going through the likes of Maru, going through the likes of TY as well, through that round of 4 and through that round of 8, and etching his name in history, etching his name on that trophy as well. So much emotion being expressed by Rogue right now as he's able to claim himself that grand prize. Of course, as he makes himself the world champion, that means who is going to be able to contend with him in StarCraft 2? Who is going to be able to deal with the dominance that Rogue has been able to encompass? As we check out exactly how Rogue was able to make it through to this championship, let's take a look.